Good afternoon, and welcome to our student-led interview with Kate Knight, who is running for Wayzata School Board. My name is Ankita Kumar, and I'm here today with our student interviewers, Alina, Alicia, and Shreya. Together, we're a part of Wayzata School Board Spotlight, a student initiative created to improve voter turnout, strengthen community education about the upcoming school board election, and advocate for student representation on the school board. Here's how today's interview will work. Each student interviewer will ask a set of pre-written questions. The candidate will respond, and then the students will have a chance to engage in a short discussion. To keep things moving, each question, candidate response, and discussion will be limited to about 3 to 5 minutes total. I'll be keeping track of time, and I'll hold up a sign when there's 1 minute remaining. If we go over, I will step in and cut off the discussion so we can cover everything on the agenda. At the end, we'll close out with questions submitted live by the community on Instagram and Facebook. Our goal is to create a conversation where students and the community can learn more about each candidate in a fair and engaging way. Thank you, Kate, and for joining us today, and let's begin. So student one will begin with our first set of questions on visions and priorities.
What inspired you to run for the Wayzata School Board, and what perspective do you hope to add to the district decision making?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks everybody for having me. Also, thanks for all the hard work that you're all putting into this, including the person behind the camera who you can't see. I think it's so important that you're bringing this kind of fair, nonpartisan view of candidates, because we all know voting is just super important as we think about where we are today, but then where we're headed. And the nonpartisan point of view, I think, is just really, really critical. So thank you all for doing that and for inviting me. Okay, what inspired me to run? Well, I've been a community member in the Wayzata district for 24 years. I have 4 kids. They've all gone through Wayzata schools. My husband was a Wayzata grad as well. I'm from the East Coast, so I moved here 21 years ago. The reason I decided to join is I think that in times of high change or just a lot happening in the world that is very uncertain, we've never seen some of these things happening before. COVID is one example. There's not really a model for what to look at. I have a background in corporate strategy and setting visions and thinking about both today and tomorrow. And a lot of the way I think about things comes from this macro perspective, like where are we, what's happening, and what do we need to be thinking about? So in a few instances of things that have happened at the school, instead of kind of sitting and thinking, I wish somebody would do something, what I typically do is reach out and ask, can I help you? On a few occasions, I've done that, most recently last year, and somebody got back to me and I thought it was really smart. They said to me, if you want to help, would you ever consider running for the school board? And I was like, what a great idea. I never thought of that. And so here I am. Just really, when I think about what I would want to add to the board, I'm definitely a nonpartisan, results-driven leader. I can build strategies, but I always love to see the action part of it. I really try to make sure that we have clear, visible, transparent priorities, that we have timeframes associated with those. And we also listen and use data to make better informed decisions. So I'm assuming in some of the questions you're going to ask me, I'm going to keep coming back to clear priorities, visible and actionable results and impact, and a lot of data, but also input from all of the constituents, whether that's students or their parents and families or teachers and staff, administration. I think we need a collective view of what's happening. Not only that, but also where we're headed.
Thank you. And then just kind of like a follow-up question. You've mentioned you reached out on some topics. What are topics that you really want to change going further? Yeah,
well, I'd say Wayzata is such a strong district, and I think we, have all experienced it. Whether that's for me seeing firsthand my kids go through Wayzata, but there's always improvements to be made. I'm not coming in with a specific set of changes I want to see made. I'm coming in more with kind of the hope that I can help and my background can help assist in any strong decisions or key decisions that would have to happen.
Thank you so much.
Great. Does anyone else have any follow-ups to that? We can move on for a second question then.
If elected, what would your top priority be for district candidates?
Yeah. I think top priorities, again, I'd really want visibility and clarity to the strategic plan. There's a strategic plan already that the Wayzata administration has developed. That's through 2027. So my first kind of goal would be to get an understanding of that and an understanding of the data and the insights behind it to see where are we making progress or where are we potentially falling behind. because both of those things always happen, right? No one's perfect, no organization's perfect. So we should expect to be ahead in some things and behind in others. I would also want to make sure that we are looking at the budgets and spending wisely. So I'd say real kind of fiscal stewardship around budgets assigned to those priorities. And then I think the third thing would be really just making sure that there's transparency and trust between all of the different layers of constituents that I mentioned before, but making sure the board trusts the administration trusts the teachers trust the families, et cetera. That is kind of the core of what I think when we think about serving the student first and foremost. We have to make sure the students at the center, we have to make sure there's trust around them with all the different parties, because each of us probably has our own list of agenda topics. And so we want to make sure, again, that we're being clear, prioritized, and we're taking action on the things that matter most.
Thank you. And then I don't really have any follow-ups for that.
I guess I was kind of wondering, with this idea of listening to the community, there was an idea that was proposed at the last board meeting about community listening sessions that had a lot of debate. So I guess I'm kind of wondering where you stand on that and where you see that could go in the future.
So anytime I'd say that there's a new initiative that's being suggested, the solution, what I try to do is back up and say, what problem are we trying to solve? So in the instance of listening sessions, I think we'd have to back up and in line and say, what problem are we trying to solve by those listening sessions? I know when you were at that meeting, we were sitting next to near each other, right? I think there were some call outs that there are already types of listening sessions or ways that community can provide input there. They can go to a board meeting and give input there. There's some things that the administration does to collect feedback and input from community members. So the real kind of call out around what's the problem we're trying to solve becomes super important, because there's a lot of solutions that you can apply to the problem as long as we understand the problem and know it. As far as listening sessions, I think we should always be listening. Tactically, how we do it, I think probably needs a little bit more structure around, again, who's going to manage it, how will we operate it. I think the last thing that we would want to happen is invite people in to provide input, and then none of that gets taken, and we want to make sure something happens after they provide the input. So having that full mechanism of what's the structure around it, understanding, again, why we're doing it, allowing people to come in and give input, and then really making sure that we're going to do something with the input that comes in is how I think about it. I'm always for listening, and I'm always for people providing input. We have to make sure it's really productive for everybody involved.
I would agree. Kind of just to pivot this back to the students, Alicia and Shreya, do you guys feel like when you bring up concerns to the administration or when you voice your problems or issues within the district, that something actually comes out of you doing that, or that you see an actual change that follows up from that visiting?
I did have, so if I did have an issue, I did reach out to administration or like a counselor or someone, but I did feel like sometimes there was like a gap, like I would email, like I wouldn't get a response back. It just felt like they weren't very taking it seriously, I guess, which I felt like that was something that was lacked from administration at the time. But
yeah. What about you?
I would say like their online appointments are sometimes like only 2 off the week. Like suppose I want to talk to a counselor today, they might be able to go next week or something like that, which kind of just like tells a little bit about it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that's really helpful. And I hope you always give input and reach out when you see something that needs a solution. I think the way I think about things is kind of from a systems perspective. And so again, I would want to make sure that the system is in place to collect the information and to make sure that something happens with it. I hope that everyone's taking seriously input that comes in from students. I think sometimes it probably is overwhelming, the amount of input that comes from across the different groups, whether again, it's students or families or administration or teachers or board members. And so I think making sure we have a really strong system in place to capture it, look at it, sort it, and then make sure that we're focused on the biggest priorities aligned to the strategic priorities of the organization. And if we're seeing a lot of things come up from a volume perspective, we should make sure that those also have a seat and kind of voice at the table. Because those are the things that actually I think help you get you set up for what's coming. We could, in my corporate world, we used to call it noise. So we'd be like, okay, there's like a lot of noise coming up around this one topic. Not that noise is bad, noise is actually good, because it gives a signal of where there's either discontent or something that might be a problem, or just something that actually might be going really well. And so collecting that and making sure that we have visibility to it, at least the way I think about it, becomes really important to capture and act on.
Amazing. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
giving such a detailed response to that.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our final question for this section.
What do you see as the biggest challenges facing Wayzata schools right now, and how would you like to address them?
Again, I think Wayzata is an amazing district, so there's tons of really great things about it. I don't know if it's the challenge, but the thing I think about a lot is the district is rated really high, kind of number one. People look to it as like the kind of pace setter, and it's big, right? And it's grown over time. Again, I'm coming at it from a business perspective. When you have a business that has had high growth and high change, and there's a lot happening in the world, the thing I always think about is what is going to happen next? And is that organization set up for what is either happening right now or what's about to happen? And so I'd say the challenge is that we have an eye towards the future, not only the today, that's absolutely critical, but also the future, and making sure that we can stay on par and actually stay at that high bar level. You always think about, and you guys are probably too young for this, but I'll say, Kodak. And when you look at business case studies, Kodak is always one that's called out. They were number one, they made the best cameras, and then all of a sudden they did not understand the things that would disrupt them around them. I think we have to be really aware of what could disrupt from a school's perspective, and make sure that we have our eyes set on that and we're putting resources aligned to those things. Again, I think it's super important to make sure we have clear priorities today, but also understanding the things that are coming around us.
Great. I guess I kind of have a follow-up question. From your kids or just any other youth you've talked to in the district, are there any specific issues you've heard from them that really speak to your heart or really are something that you feel passionate about? Whether that's like mental health or technology, like a lot of other candidates have mentioned.
Yeah.
Few specifics.
Yeah. I mean, I think academic excellence is kind of number one. We have to make sure that all of the students coming out of Wayzata have a high academic standard. And that's for everyone. I think that safety is huge. We have to make sure that kids feel, students feel safe. And when I say safe, I mean physically and psychologically safe, but that they feel this sense of belonging. I think technology is a huge one. I think with the kind of emergence of AI, there's a lot of uncertainty around what does that mean? And again, that's kind of like, where are we today and how do we balance that? But I think, and mental health, right? I think we cannot exclude that at all. It's such a top priority and top of mind as a parent, making sure the kids are okay, making sure students are okay. And so those would be the things I would expect to see in kind of a strategic plan and set of priorities, amongst other things, right? But I think getting those clear and making sure we're focused on them and really paying attention to the students and the teachers is kind of top of mind.
Great. Do you guys have any follow-ups to that?
Not really.
What are you guys worried about?
I feel like for me, I'm just worried about like kind of going into what my future is going to look like. And when you have so many kids in like your classes and you're all kind of a part of the same things, you worry about like, oh, well, if there's not much like, it's kind of like if there's not much difference between us, how am I going to get from point A when they might just take someone who's exactly like me? So I think my kind of like what I see is the strive to keep being better, but then you have like, it's kind of like the mental part of it where it's like you keep trying to be better, but then nothing's ever good enough to make you like, you just keep wanting to do more. And then there's just like, you run out of everything to do.
Yeah.
And kind of just the whole mental part of it where it's like, you're trying to be as great academically as you can be, but then you feel like you're never going to be good enough. So
Yeah. What about you? Any other thoughts on that?
I moved to Wayzata 7 months ago.
Okay.
And so in my old district, I guess there wasn't more of like a academic competition. So like when I came here, it was like a shift for me, and I was like, oh, everyone's in all these clubs, everyone's in these classes, they have APs, and I was like, because I came from an IB school, I didn't know anything about AP. So I feel like the way that they explained stuff to like me that when I came here, I didn't understand anything. I didn't understand the system.
Yeah.
So I just felt lost until like I made friends. But I feel like that shouldn't be the case. Like anyone who comes here should be able to clearly picture how their life is gonna look like from that
I love
point on.
that. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I
What
feel
about
like connecting on hers, going into like my senior year, I think I have like a lot of guidance sessions, way more. But I think like juniors should also have them going into senior year,
Yeah.
which was like a huge shift for me. Like they're like, oh, do this, do that now. But if you had probably told me like a couple of months ago, it would have been like a way more like slow pace than like.
Yeah. My son, I told these guys, but for everybody watching, my son is also a senior, juniors really hard. So I love that. I love all of these comments. I'll just tell you all what I tell my kids. You are all going to be fine. Just be yourself. The thing I just always say is like, right, if you feel like you're competing, just think about who you are as a person. I always tell my kids, like, just be kind. Being kind is like the core part of what you should be thinking about, because you are all distinct and unique. And you don't, I know it's hard to think about it now, but don't worry about competing with other people. Just be yourself and you'll get to the right place that you want to go. And if you need support, I'm here to help you at any time. I'm happy to talk to anybody. And if you need extra help when you came in, I think speak up and make sure that you're telling people what you think. I think it's interesting sometimes and maybe you feel like this when you get to a new place, you're like, maybe it's just me that's thinking about it. But then I always tell, whether it's people on my team at work or my kids, it's not just you. If you feel like that, other people feel like it too. And you should speak up and say something. So, but I think just kind of like human kindness and being yourself really kind of is the thing to think about. But I know it's stressful.
That's beautiful. I think it's a really great core value to have, kindness in general. All right. Thank you. Let's now turn to the questions about student experience and equity. Student 2 will lead with our next set of questions. Sorry.
How familiar are you with our district's current priorities, opportunities, and areas of continued growth?
Is there specific programs, or that's kind of like a broad question? Are there specific pieces of it?
I think it was more meant to be a opportunity for you to say how familiar you are with specific district programs or just clubs, extracurriculars, things you might have seen with your own kids or just around the community.
So having 4 kids, I guess it might make me familiar with it to an extent, because obviously they're in a lot of different things. Each of them are very different and unique in their own regard. I think Wayzata does a great job. I remember I grew up in a very small town in upstate New York that had like 2,000 people in it. So much smaller than even the high school, right? When I moved here, I was like, whoa, the high school is so big, and that thing seems scary. But then I think as my kids started growing and getting to the high school age, it's such an amazing place because it is almost like college, right? There's so many different opportunities. And, I think as I was raising kids, I think, oh, geez, should they be in a smaller school or should we send them to Wayzata? I think the breadth of what Wayzata offers, which can suit so many different interests, are amazing. So that might be too broad of an answer. If you have questions on specific things I've seen, I'm happy to answer those too. But I think the breadth of what I have seen really is a good thing, just because it allows a lot of people to fit in because you see yourself in all these different clubs or you find your people. I think sometimes at a really small school, that's hard to do.
Yeah. Turning this back to the students, do you guys feel like you found your people?
I feel like being involved in so many different clubs, you do by like different groups of people for like different things. Like you obviously have like your group of friends that you can go to for anything, but I feel like just being involved in so many different things, you're able to kind of like there's sort of like groups for like different parts of yourself, different like sides. So I know I had like my friends that I have in like speech and debate. I know I'm very close with them.
Yeah.
But then I also have my friends I just do like student council and volunteer club with. But then you also have friends that's like, oh, we both like share a really big passion in business. So I do like BPA and DECA. So you kind of have like, you meet all these different people where you share interests, so you're able to like connect with these different people on different levels. Almost.
Yes, I love that. Being new, what do you think?
I'm just new, right? So I would join clubs and I joined this club.
Yeah.
And I met like amazing people, of course.
Aw.
And I feel like that's good because I have like connections now. Like I feel like
Yeah.
I know people in the school and I feel like clubs like sort of help me get to know the people around the school, like no matter their grade.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel like a stranger.
That's amazing. What about you?
I would say the same thing, like finding your people depends more on you.
Yeah.
So like you reaching out to clubs and finding, like, it doesn't matter if you join like random clubs.
Yeah.
It's like in the process. And I think Wayzata offering so many clubs is like the best thing
Yeah.
for that.
What about you?
For me, I do agree with pretty much everything they've said. I think everyone here is an overachiever. That's kind of the vibe I get from every single person.
That's the
in this
vibe I
room.
get too. You're all
Yeah.
amazing.
And we are the people that go out and create those communities if we can't find them,
Yeah.
or we put a big effort out there to just kind of join the ones that we're interested in. And
Yeah.
like I said, I'm very involved with civic engagement and making sure students' voices are heard in like
Yeah.
every space that are making decisions about those students,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I guess I was just kind of thinking about, as we were all talking, what happens to the students that aren't as
Yeah.
proactive?
Yeah.
The ones that maybe are left behind, or the ones that aren't able to join the clubs as easily as some of us are.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that they feel heard and that they find their community too?
Yeah. I would love for you all to tell me if you've seen that, how you've done it. I know I'll just say, right, because as a board member, that's like far removed from
Right.
that kind of piece
That's
of
more
it
of the
at the student
administration.
level. But I'm going to go back to the kindness thing. Something I just always tell my kids, and my husband and I talk to our kids about a lot, is we say, if somebody's acting mad or a little bit off in your close group of friends or not, I think the best thing is to say, go talk to them or say, oh, hey, how's your day going? Because I know from growing up, but even now and as an adult, I still do it. Sometimes you feel off because something's going on inside, but you're not sure how to like reach out or talk about it. So I try to tell my kids, like, if somebody's acting different, then ask them why, or ask them if there's something you can do. But have you noticed or been in those situations at school where you've seen people? What do you think? What do you think the best approach is?
I feel like the best approach is sometimes I know when I'm like upset, I don't want to be asked what's wrong. I want to kind of just like a minute to reset. So I feel like if you see someone off, you obviously want to be able to help. But I feel like the best thing you can do is also give them space and be able to help them kind of like, you want to make sure that they're in a space where they like, if they want help, they can get it. But also just kind of like give them a moment of grace and then be able to help them when they're ready. But also going off of on Keith's point of how to make sure like kids get the help they need, or if they want to be like in all these different clubs, like how you would help them achieve that. Because I know I've had close friends who have wanted to like join a bunch of different clubs because of the high fees they weren't able to. So I was kind of like wondering how you would want to like kind of help that area of growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question. Again, typically what I would do, and it's hard sometimes because I'm not on the board now, looking at the information, what I typically do is I'd say, take all the input I'm getting, look at the data and have an understanding of, is there a big gap here? Why or why not? The Wayzata Education Fund, I think, is a great kind of resource to think about if there was a huge gap, or whether it's big or small, a gap for kids who can't join clubs because they can't pay the fees. Would that be an opportunity to help them get to do that? I know teachers, at least from kind of my experience, are always making sure and looking and paying attention to where there might be those issues and troubles. And so I think it's always making sure that we're putting the student first, really having that caring mindset to make sure that, I love the idea of giving people grace 100%, but making sure we have an eye to who's struggling or who's doing okay and where we might need to put our resources against.
Well, I think that's a good transition to our next question.
How would you make sure students' voices are included in school board decisions?
Yeah, I think school as a board in general, board members should always be kind of on the ground listening, hearing, and taking input and feedback. And what that means to me, or how I would do it, is just making sure I'm, whether it's in the community, at an event, always asking people, how's it going? What could be better? What do you think's going well? I think that constant pulse is something that's just like super important. So that can be like a student input, that could be a teacher input, an administration input. I think, again, there's probably also different ways that students could give input to the school board. I know there's been some conversation around would there be student members on the board? Again, anytime there's a new initiative being suggested, instead of saying like, let's do this solution, making sure that we're saying what problem are we solving is crystal clear, because any type of initiative we know needs resources, human power, and or budget a lot of times. And when, again, we want to make sure we're keeping our priorities really straight and strong. But I think the idea of like a student member on the board could be an interesting opportunity. I'd love for the group, and maybe you have already explored, what are other ways to do the input? Because it also might not be good way of spending your time. So the way I like to tackle things like that is, you know, what's the pro and con? Is it a good idea now or forever? What would be the benefit of it? What would we hope to achieve out of it? And then you take a step back and think through, does this make sense or not? One thing I'll just give an example on, because we had an idea of this when I worked in a corporate setting where we had an executive board internally, and a lot of younger team members were saying, hey, we'd love to be on that board. So again, we kind of stepped back and said, what problem are we trying to solve? How do we make sure that we're making the best decision out of this? And instead of putting younger team members or newer team members onto the executive committee, we actually developed a shadow board that board would actually get the same topics, and we'd run through almost like a board meeting with the students or team members at that point. And we would take that input and bounce it up against what the board decided. And it's interesting because in many cases, separately, right, they didn't have the benefit of hearing each other. They were actually making the same decisions. So it's just another idea. But again, really stepping back, making sure we're looking and thinking through problems to solve.
I would agree with that. I think it's important to make sure that if there were a student representative on the board,
Yeah.
it's fair, it's inclusive, and making sure that it's an equitable opportunity for all students to either have a say in or at least try out or participate with.
Yeah.
I guess kind of as this is like a preliminary suggestion, what would you guys want to look for in a student representative on the
Yeah.
school board? And like, what is your opinion of having a student representative on the school board?
I think it's important to have like a student that was in the school board, because at the end of the day, that's the person that's going to be in the school. That
Yeah.
person is going to be going through everything like those 4 years. So I feel like they're going to have a perspective that maybe some board members don't have, which I think is important. And I feel like something that this, like a quality that the student representative should have, is that they should be able to like hear others' opinions and like be able to treat everyone like fairly and like with the mindset of like, I'm not going to favor this or I'm not going to favor that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. What about
I
you?
think similar to hers, I would say like for some clubs, like suppose like DECA, in one of my classes recently, they just came in and like introduced what they were trying to do, like their goals and everything, and just advertise their club. I think the student representative should, or maybe can do something like that.
Yeah.
Just come into the class, ask students like questions. Oh, what do you want from the school board?
I love it.
Or something like that. And just like, yeah, I think that bridges the gap in between the school board and the student representatives. Cause like up till now, I had no idea what the school board was
Yeah,
until joining this club, which gave me a lot of info about it.
That's
which
great.
was, like, super cool. Yeah.
that's good. Great ideas.
I feel like along with like the student representative, one thing the school board already has is school spotlights, where I've been a part of this a while back, where the school they'll pick a school and they'll come and like share the things like the school is doing. So I feel like that's something we should definitely continue and maybe even dig deeper on, just like not the great things that the school is doing, but also what the school needs help on, what the students need. And also adding on to the student representative, I feel like we shouldn't just have one student. It should be, I feel like we should have, or if we do have one student, we should switch it out for each meeting on different topics, because I feel like one student can't like describe what every single student is feeling. There shouldn't just be one person saying, oh, well, the students need this, this, and this, because every person is a part of different things. And every person needs like different needs.
I think those are all great examples. And another kind of good way then to think about, if we just said, yep, one student on there and they stay for a year, that's not really hitting what you're all saying. So another kind of example of why to step back and think through pros and cons, what would make this productive, what would be the downfalls of it. not rushing to a solution on something, but really thinking about what problem are we trying to solve, which sounds like input from the students at a broad level. And then thinking through, is that original solution the best one? So I love whiteboarding because I have a strategy background. So if you guys want to whiteboard on this topic, I'm happy to come to school and kind of draw it out with you to think through it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think one thing is for certain, like this would be an initiative that takes time and effort to
Yeah.
consider all opinions on that. And one of the goals with Wayzata School Board Spotlight is to advocate for more student representation on the school board.
Yep.
And that can look like many different things.
Yeah.
Right now, this is one way we're doing that, right? By having students interact with potential future board members.
Yeah.
And I think if there were to be a student representative on the school board, not only would they have to find a way to make it comprehensive of so many different viewpoints, they would also have to make sure it doesn't have an extra strain on the students. I mean, those board meetings are 1 to 2 hours long, and it would have to be a student that's not only passionate about that role, but someone that would take it seriously and would actually add meaningful discourse to the conversations. Right?
That's a good point.
Great. All right. Well, I think with that, we can move on to your final question in this section. And it is a little bit reminiscent of the mental health stuff we were talking about earlier, but it can be a chance to elaborate.
What steps would you take to improve mental health support and well-being for students?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think as a parent, mental health, again, is top of mind. I think probably all of us know people who suffer from mental health, right? So it's not like an isolated instance. It's a global kind of issue and topic right now. From a what would I do? I think that it's each parent's job to make sure that their students, children are good, kind of, you know, as good as can be. We know we send them to school for 8 hours a day. And I think a lot of that gets put on the teachers. The teachers do such an amazing job taking care of making sure everybody is, like we were talking about before, who's doing okay, who needs some extra help. I don't have a specific, I'm going to do this to make mental health be better, because I think that's such a broad global topic, but it's making sure that we know everybody, that we understand where they're coming from, that we understand what struggles they might be having, that we're gaining input from them, allowing them, making sure they're speaking up when they need something, they have their people. But I think the only way we're going to solve this is if we kind of band together collectively, and again, really make sure that we're prioritized on the most important things that we think can help from a school perspective. As a board member, one of the things I would make sure is that it's a priority, and that I understand clearly what initiatives are under that, the funding allotted to them, and make sure that against all the other priorities, that's fair and actually making progress, if that makes sense. So again, not a I'm going to do this to fix this because it's such a global macro issue, but it's really making sure that we have the right resources, the right funding, and the right kind of initiatives against it, again, against all of the priorities in total.
Great. Does anyone have any follow-ups to that? That's perfect. We're right on schedule. We can move on to the third section on community and governance.
What personal and professional experiences prepare you to contribute to guiding our district?
Yeah. Well, one, I'd say my experience as a parent, and now I'm the ground parent right now. I have 4 kids, 2 in college, 1 a senior and 1 an 8th grader, and all of them have gone through Wayzata. So just the understanding, the knowledge of you mentioned it, like I didn't understand the system. I have a long, over 2 decades of experience with this system and understanding it at a parent level, not claiming to know it at any other level than that. So I think that's one. I think my corporate experience for sure is something. So whether I have experiences as an entrepreneur, I taught at the University of Minnesota. I've also was a corporate senior executive for 15 years at a Fortune 50 company. And my role there was really to make sure that we had clear priorities, a clear vision, and initiatives set against those. And I did a lot of making sure that there was alignment and discipline around those priorities. So at the highest level, it's not only setting the initiative, but activating on the initiative and making sure that we are making progress against those. So I'd say from a corporate perspective. And then last, I'd say from a community perspective. So ranging from being a neighborhood association president to a room parent to a youth coach. I also served 2 terms on the Interfaith Outreach Community Board. So loved that experience, just really kind of digging in with that group, making sure that the people who use that service have their needs met kind of day to day. And then I think just kind of collectively those things together kind of set me up for being able to make an impact. Now, I think as voters need to make sure that they're doing their due diligence on the candidates. So well done for illustrating that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the mix of the board as well. It's interesting. Sometimes it's like, oh, let's get all the same type of people. I'd say we never always want the same type of people anywhere. We want to make sure that there's a balanced portfolio of different types and different people who collectively can add the most value for the district.
I think that's good.
Thank you.
How would you keep parents, students, and staff involved in and engaged in board decisions?
Yeah, I have a huge focus on transparency and visibility. I think when there's not transparency, it just causes, I'll say, chaos. If people don't understand what's happening, they can't actually get behind something or productively have a conversation around it because they're kind of each going back in their own heads and thinking through, well, what do I want versus what you want versus what you want. So the transparency and visibility to the strategic plan, the priorities, the data around that, and the progress against those, I think is kind of like one of the things that I always make sure in anything that I'm either working on or leading that's there. I would want the same for the district. I think the district, again, does a great job, but there's always room to improve. And especially when you're in times of growth, making sure that that communication, the visibility to the data and the insights and the input is very clear is so important.
Great. As a parent, how do you feel like the district has been communicating with you? And do you feel as though there's ways to improve that communication?
Again, I think there's always ways to improve. I do see the district doing a good job communicating and trying different modes of communication. With 4 kids, I think, you probably can't imagine, but with 4 kids, I got lots of communication in my email, on my phone, different apps. I think that Parent Square has been helpful in terms of kind of pushing out information, and it almost becomes a little bit more bite-sized. You can click into it if you want more information. But I see them trying and trying new things. I think that's always helpful. I think we should always have an experimentation mentality of we're not going to do an email or let's just use mail. We're not going to use mail because we think mail is what we've always done and that's what we're going to continue to do in the future. It's like you have to move from mail to email to kind of these app pushes out to text messages. So I think that the district is doing a good job. Again, I think there can always be more clarity and transparency. And I'd say specifically probably around the details of where we are from a strategic plan perspective is what I think I can help in.
Amazing. Let me caveat this back to the students. How many of you guys actually click and read through the student newsletters?
I find them interesting because sometimes if I'm in the middle of class, I'm like really bored. I'll just read through them really quick.
Which is never right now. Just kidding.
But for my parents, my mom's an administrator in Osseo. So I feel like for her she helps with the emails sometimes.
Yeah.
So I feel like for her going through the emails, if she knows someone's going to read them, it's kind of like just a hassle for her.
Yeah.
She'll always complain to me, she's like, I was writing this email today. But for her, she kind of just likes, for her, I feel like it's more of like, and for me, I like when there's an email sometimes, but there's also times where I'm like, this isn't that important, or it could have just been like on a poster in the school or something. And there's some stuff that they put on there. I'm like, that doesn't need to be on there. There's just some sources of information where I think it could be better. And there's some like details where I think they should focus more on instead of putting in an email where no one's going to read it. Yeah.
No one else has anything else to add? We can move on to our final question.
So if tough decisions come up where the community is divided, how would you approach that?
Oh, yeah. It's so tough, right? Because we each have our own different perspective. I feel like I'm really just repeating myself, but I think in my kind of career, one of the things that was my main job, was ensuring that we were listening across, understanding each point of view, and then facilitating conversations to get to some type of alignment. I think when there's a divide, what is helpful is thinking about which things are we aligned on, and kind of writing those down. Again, I said I like the whiteboard, sticky notes everywhere. So it's kind of like, let's all write down the things that we think we're aligned on this topic. And then it kind of helps reduce the things that we're not aligned on, if that makes sense. And that makes it easier to tackle those things. I think a lot of times too, what would happen when there was a divide is that there'd be lost trust or mistrust. And in those instances, facilitated so many meetings where the goal was to kind of regain trust or how to kind of build trust amongst groups. And so there's different ways to try to get to building up trust over time, which I think is always important. And I think it's just kind of a variety of ways to make sure that we maintain trust, have visibility of the priorities, understand where we are aligned, and then really make sure that everyone has positive intent to get to the finish line on the places that we're not aligned. Because we all have, different points of view. We all come from different backgrounds, have different experiences. Perfect alignment can never be the first answer. It won't ever be. And so almost saying like, we are willing to work through these tough issues and stick with it because we know it's in the best interest of the student is really hopefully the goal and what I would hope kind of to bring to the board.
Amazing. I think that was a really great way to wrap up our student interview section. For our closing, we'll take questions submitted directly from the community who are watching us live on Facebook and Instagram. Let's start with our first question. How do you plan on addressing gaps between students and groups from different backgrounds?
Yeah, so not knowing specifically what the gaps are, again, I'd fall back on what is the data telling us, and then what's the input from parents, teachers, students, administration, and understanding those two things together. I love to take the kind of human input piece of it with the data and analytics, because you can't just look at the numbers and be like, oh, I know how to solve this. You always have to have the input with it. And then I'd say, again, it's almost like, okay, where do we have a problem and where do we not have a problem, and focusing on those things. Whatever the topic or the gap is, I think then we say, do we have the right resources? Do we have the right budget? Are we making sure that we have focused priorities against these gaps? If so, great. And let's keep making progress against those. And if not, why not? And where would we have to potentially pull from, or how would we restructure so that we were making progress on those? So I know I keep coming back and explaining how I would address it or the way I make decisions. But hopefully that's helpful, because again, we could come up with 15 solutions to something, but unless we know the problem and have the input and the data and the insights behind it, we're never going to be able to get to alignment to make the best decision for the student. So that's how I'd approach it.
That makes sense. Another person from the community asked, Wayzata students are involved in everything from advanced academics to arts to community service. If elected, how would you balance supporting high-achieving students while also ensuring that every student feels equally valued and has opportunities to thrive?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We'll just kind of go back to kind of my work at Interfaith Outreach, right? Like, I feel like I got to see firsthand the students who are potentially using IOCP as a service and the struggles that they have. That's for sure out there. I think in addition, there's high achieving students, and there's also students who we don't know what their struggles are either. So for me, and I always, again, want to make sure we have this broad view of what the struggles are, and are we putting the right resources against them? As I mentioned before, I think the parents are kind of one set of resources for the students in collective, but the teachers do just such an amazing job caring for every student that walks in the door. I think getting their input and making sure that we have visibility to what they're seeing and saying as well is just so important. And so it's kind of this collective view of input. And again, we have to make sure we understand the priorities, because every single topic and initiative can't be solved, but we need to make sure we're solving the biggest ones to make sure that the district remains such a strong and great district.
Great. Our final question from the community was, if you could design one class that doesn't exist yet at Wayzata, something students actually need for the future, what would it be and why?
Oh my.
This is
Okay, well, the
interesting.
course book is really big, so I don't know if this exists. Let me think. So I think I would develop a course on how to make decisions. I'm going to call it making decisions in the unknown.
That's very vague.
So making decisions in the unknown. It's interesting when we make decisions, whether it's at a school district or in a business or just in life, we love certainty and we love making believe, even if we don't have certainty on something, that we have it. So we don't know what's going to happen an hour from now or tomorrow or next week. And so really every time you're making a decision, you're making it in the unknown. You're using history and information behind you to say, like, I have this knowledge in my head. We actually don't know what's going to shift or change. So when you're making decisions on the unknown, guess what I'm going to say? I'm going to tell you what I've been saying all along. You take input from people, you use data and analytics to inform it, and you make evidence-based decisions. And you don't make solutions. You don't design solutions or make decisions forever, but you make them in an iterative way that you can change as you're moving over time. So you don't lock yourself into a position, but you kind of make them based on the best known information you have. So I might make a class like that would kind of help students not feel hampered by the uncertainty that they're facing ahead, but making you all feel confident in yourself by the decisions that you're making today based on who you are as a person.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Kate,
Yeah,
for joining
thank
us
you.
today. And thank you to our student interviewers and all the students who turned out live on Instagram, Facebook, and other community members as well. On behalf of Wayzata School Board Spotlight, we appreciate your time and your willingness to engage directly with students. Our goal is to make this election as accessible and meaningful to the whole community as possible, and conversations like this are an important part of that work. Please look forward to our future candidate interviews and fill out our Pledge to Engage form linked in our Instagram bio to stay connected and involved in this election. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.